I mean, in the developing world, the first world, the developed nations, they had their turn at establishing a middle class, at getting education opportunities. It's our time in the developing world. And we're willing to work at a lower wage than they are. And what's the free market going to do? The free market is going to say, it's like the Eye of Sauron. It's so awesome. It's like the Eye of Sauron. It's like lowest bidder, bing! Wow! Right? So then the gaze of the market goes to the... I love that. The gaze of the market goes to the developing world and like, hey, you guys are willing to work? They're like, we're willing to work. So they get to work. And their socioeconomic status rises. The developed ED world cannot simply just sit back and be like, they took our jobs. Those jobs can never come back. Any politician, anybody in the establishment, any person that tries to fight for getting those jobs back is a moron. Those jobs can never come back. Those jobs have been outsourced. But now they're outsourced permanently. It's not like outsourcing is something that's temporary. No. The Eye of Sauron, in a sense, right? The global economic free market is looking for those who are willing to work for the lowest wage, for good or for bad, more sort of neutral, because there are a ton of benefits they're going to get, right? So that the critique of neoliberalism is just this entirely bad thing is a bit biased, right? Because their socioeconomic status is going to start to reach a mean, right? It's going to elevate. The global middle class will elevate within the developing world. What the developed ED world needs to do is to create a new supply. What the developed nations need to do is to create a new supply. What is the next generation of jobs going to look like? It's not going to be manufacturing. And we need to figure out what that is. And all of our emphasis and all the minds and all the brain power needs to be set on that. So, obviously the political establishment has to change in response to this new demand. That's what's being said. Political self-determination, which is what I just explained. 3, participate in the common heritage of mankind, which is obvious. Shared space, resources, and so on, right? And this really does become important. I'll talk about this later in the series. We have to make sure that we make sense of our relationship to the environment, our relationship to fellow human beings, because there is a sense in which exploitation obviously is a byproduct of, and some people would say I'll take that back. Exploitation is inherent in capitalism, but the way that you make sense of exploitation is difficult, right? I don't want to just sort of bash it, just generalize across the board, but it is inherent in capitalism. There are remedies to it, but also capitalism has lots of advantages, right? There's a lot of benefit that you get. And the right to peace, the right to humanitarian and disaster relief, sustainable environment, as I just said, and so on. Lastly, for this section is just a brief account of the articulations between first, second, and third. I'm not going to go into too much, I'm just going to read this quote. First generation proponents, inspired by the natural law and laissez-faire traditions, are partial to the view that first generation proponents, inspired by natural law and laissez-faire traditions, and I'll put natural law here as well, that's good. We know what that means. And laissez-faire traditions are generalizable, are partial to the view that human rights are inherently independent of organized society, prior to social contract, conceptually, and our individuality. Conversely, second and third generation defenders often look upon first generation rights, at least as commonly practiced, as insufficiently attentive to material, especially basic human rights. Yeah, the rights that you guys are arguing for are the most basic rights, right? Okay, yeah, I have the right not to be arbitrarily arrested. I have the right not to be tortured. I have the right not to be enslaved. Great. Guess what? I also have this economic right. I need to make sense of my relationship to a global community. I need to make money. I need to talk about socio-cultural aspects, and there are rights that correspond with all of that. What you're saying is not that it's not important, it's just that it's the most basic of rights. There's so many other things that we need, especially economic, and if the disparities in economic wealth aren't addressed, if the opportunity to be employed isn't addressed, if there are no jobs, then, you know, we're going to get back to that state of nature anyway, right? That's sort of the idea. As insufficiently attentive to material, especially basic human needs, and indeed as instruments in service to unjust social orders, hence constituting a bourgeois illusion. Okay, so I think with that, you should have everything you need conceptually to make sense. And now that you understand this, you can complicate things. The distinction between first and third, the distinction between third and second, third and first and second, blah, blah, blah. Now that you understand what each of them do, and you understand sort of conceptually the development from first generation human rights to second generation human rights, at least conceptually, from second to third, I think you'll have a very, very firm grounding in the foundational accounts and development of human rights. With that, I want to thank you for taking your time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Have a good day.